Welcome to the MS Dev Show, episode number 120. This week, Carl and I disagree on the trolley problem, using code for home automation, and Jason has a...
This episode of the MS Dev Show is brought to you by Infragistics, providing tools and solutions to accelerate design, development, insights, and collaboration for any organization.
This week we have nobody. Okay, well, that's a lie. We have Carl and Jason. It's all about us this week. So
Not
Carl,
all of us.
Yeah. So, but Carl thought it would be a good idea just to have an episode with just him and I, and we could talk about stuff that was on our mind. We've done this before, but apparently Carl has nothing on his mind, so it's mostly just the stuff I came up with. So we'll just have discussions around that.
Yeah, I might have a thing or two to bring up, but we'll see how this show goes.
Yeah.
But the other thing this episode is about is Infragistics and their ultimate license winner this week. This week, we picked somebody who commented on the webpage on msdevshow.com. He was commenting on the first That Conference episode that we had for 2016, because we also did 2015 as well. He said, "Great job, Carl. Really enjoy the conference episodes and getting to hear from multiple points of view. I'll actually cut some of this off.
Yeah.
And multiple technologies. Your interviews are always interesting." Well, I picked him for a couple of reasons. One, it was good feedback, and two, because he said something good about me. So if you would like your name mentioned and to win an Infragistic Ultimate license like Big Kahuna, you can email us at feedback@msdevshow.com. You can leave feedback on Stitcher, YouTube, and we really like these 5-star iTunes reviews as well.
Okay. And thank you for everybody, for our entire audience, for listening to me and not mentioning to Carl what I did in the first video for that conference. And I don't think Carl's watched it.
I have not watched it.
And now he's really confused.
Although I think you did tell me. Did you splice in? No, you didn't. Okay.
Maybe I mentioned something, but yeah, for the most part, I didn't say anything. So anyway, so thank you guys. You guys are awesome. That's going to bug Carl the whole episode. So this
all right.
Great.
So now we need to take a time out so I can watch that, apparently.
No, just you can watch it afterward. It's just pretty funny. It has nothing to do with you. I just told everybody not to mention anything to you because I just put a whole bunch of stupid stuff in there. Okay, so let's jump into the news. So we have tons and tons of news and cool stuff to cover this week. So let's just dive in here. So the first one here: how to ditch Chrome's new material design and get the old look back. So I guess first of all, I got this update the one day on one of my computers and not another one. And I was like, what the heck is going on? So I sent you a message and I'm like, how the heck do I fix this? And
the first thing you noticed is they're both on the same version, except this
that
version
was the thing.
ends with an M.
Yeah.
And this one doesn't. So I was looking up a few things and noticed that one of them with the M meant that you have material design.
Right.
And that was also the one that was bugging you because it looked different.
No. So just the fact that they were different what was what was bugging me, right? Mm-hmm. So I actually really don't have a preference here. In fact, what I did on the other machine is I actually opted into the material design. And it's just one of those things where you have to get used to it, I think. Maybe you have a more polarizing opinion.
I think that, for my opinion here, so if you go into the article that we'll have in the show notes, they'll tell you how to either opt in or opt out of this feature if you want. So if you're not sure what we're talking about, it also shows pictures comparing and contrasting the one with and one without material design. The thing that I have a problem with is it just looks like it's not quite completed yet. And that's because it's not completed yet. So some of the things just don't seem quite as polished with the material design version. My biggest problem is how the tabs look and how the new tab button looks up there. It just
the tabs are pretty funky.
It needs a little bit of polishing yet.
And they do keep tweaking it. So the folders themselves, now they have rounded corners. I think they're a little bit tighter in the gutters. The tabs are themselves have kind of a square, more squarish corner. So I don't know. I think they're just playing around. It's just kind of interesting that they are just testing on their basically on users. But the thing is, like, I don't know how they get any feedback on it because it's great, rolling this out to a certain percentage. I don't know if they're just looking for bugs, but it's not like they asked me to vote on which one I like better. So they don't know.
The fact that you enabled it or disabled it is enough to give them feedback.
Yeah, maybe if they get telemetry on that. Anyway, yeah, like Carl said, the page shows the two different types. They'll show you what they both look like, so you can figure out if you have the old or the new. If you notice that in your browser and you're like, what the heck is going on? Well, now go to the show notes at msdevshow.com and take a look. And you can also see how to turn it on and off.
And like you said, when it comes to a lot of these design things, a lot of people like to freak out when they initially happen. So yeah. I've actually been a lot better about like not voicing too much like opinion unless there's something that's just really hard to use. Because I remember when Apple on their most recent, I think iOS 7, when they did that big change to their flat design, everybody just flipped their lid about that.
Yep.
And you know what? Most people are okay with it. There's a few that,
it just doesn't register anymore. Yeah.
But you get used to some of these new designs and eventually you look at it and you're like, wow, that's old.
Yeah. Same with like the ribbon in Office. Heck, I remember, if you remember Outlook, it used to have a different layout. The emails were at the top and the reading pane was at the bottom. And a coworker of mine, he's just like, what is with these idiots? Like, why would they put the reading pane on the right? And like he was just so adamant that this was just like the worst thing in the world. And now I have a hard time picturing the way that it used to be. So yeah, I don't know. Live with it for a while. See if you get used to it. If after 2 weeks you're just like, okay, this is still hurting my eyes, then whatever. Then maybe switch it. Okay, happy 10th birthday, Pandoc.
So Pandoc is a tool that we've had as our tip of the week before. It's a tool, a command line PowerShell tool that you can use to convert from one kind of document to another. It's super handy, and it's actually how we get the show notes done, to be honest. I rely on this every week. I've used this at work, a bunch of other places, and I knew it's been around for a while, but I didn't know it's been 10 years old. So this is, to me, a pretty successful open source project, and I was reading along in some of the comments to find out just what some of the history was. One of the other things I didn't realize is it's written in the back end entirely in Haskell.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
So I just wanted to say a shout out to the maintainers for this project. It's pretty awesome. It's something we use. And I'm sure if you think about, if you have kind of a document that you need to convert into another document, that happens a little bit more often than you want. You might be able to automate it.
Yep. This is a universal converter.
Yep.
Very cool. Okay. Google is working on a new operating system called Fuchsia. So Carl, are we just totally guessing now why they're doing this? Have they indicated at all why they're doing this?
So I don't think that I've heard anything about this is exactly why it's here and what it's for.
Okay.
But this is a new operating system, not based on Android, not based on Linux, not based on Java or any of those things that Google's kind of gotten in trouble for in the past.
Yeah.
So it's also an operating system that will work on mobile, but it'll also be able to handle, full desktop resources and potentially even server resources. So if you have a computer has tons of memory, has tons of applications you might need to switch between, it's optimized for that. But also at the same time, if you have something resource constrained, it looks like it'll be able to handle that too.
Okay.
And if we kind of look at that, with all the trouble that Google has been in the past with just litigations and lawsuits, not that they've necessarily done anything wrong. I don't want to point fingers, even though sometimes I can get finger pointing happy at Google. Mm-hmm. This is, to me, would be a smart move if they can transition Chrome OS and Android to this Fuchsia OS. It's also kind of the model that Windows has taken. They moved to one core.
Yeah.
And now all of their platforms are based on that. So, it's not unprecedented to do a move like this either.
Yeah. I mean, when you don't have any baggage and you're just creating something brand new, there's every possibility like in the future, right? What's interesting though, with doing something like this, and my big concern would be that, Linux and Windows and all these other operating systems have been around for so long, and you could look at them and say, oh, they have all these ugly things in them and hacks and things like that. Some of those should just get removed, So it's one of those things too where you're like, if it ain't broke, don't touch it. So, I just worry like there's going to be all these like missing pieces, right? You're going to try it on this exotic piece of hardware or whatever. Again, we don't know what their focus is, if it's going to be on specialized hardware or what that's going to look like, but it doesn't have like 20 years of experience necessarily baked in, like Windows and Linux and some of these other even, Unix and, even iOS and things like that are based on Unix. So, same thing, right? Where they just have that history in there built in, which is a blessing and a curse. But I worry in this case they don't have the curse, but they also don't have the blessing. So I don't know if they start out sort of specialize with what they're trying to do. It sounds like it could be on mobile phones. It could be on their on hub router or IoT devices, and then maybe they expand it out to other device types. That could be a good approach to avoid that whole issue.
Yeah, but the other thing that's actually, I find kind of curious is how will people who are already in like the Android ecosystem take to something like this? How easily can they convert all of their existing apps and app libraries on the store over? And, if they don't have an answer for that, that could be very devastating to people who have those kind of devices and could make them switch.
Well, I would hope that they would make it.
I would hope so too, and I would think
yeah.
that they have that, but
Yeah.
It's one thing that users are finicky.
Yeah.
It's one thing that, I've kind of noticed throughout the years is it doesn't take much for a group of people, or even just, you get a few people in the leader positions or the thought leader positions to question it, and all of a sudden everybody else is jumping off.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll see. So right now we're just totally guessing, and it's open source, right? So we'll have a link to the to the source code.
It's not entirely open source, but there's a mirror of the source on GitHub.
Okay.
So you can see what's going on.
So that source is open.
So you can read it, and you can do stuff with it.
It's not developed as an open source project, but the source
Correct.
is open. Okay, good distinction. Okay, Microsoft to drop Azure Remote app in favor of Citrix virtualization technology. So fortunately, like I haven't asked about the inside story on this, so I can actually comment on this, because if I knew the inside story, then I might have different comments. But yeah, remote app is, you basically have a year to move off of it. And if you want a remote app type scenario, then you need to use Citrix. And I guess I should explain what that is. So, we obviously have things like remote desktop where you can, access another computer over a super high performance remote connection. And these days, like it's crazy how good the performance is. I mean, it's so optimized that if you have if you're dragging a window around, like it hardly takes any bandwidth to transmit around like that move. And then if you're playing a video, like it knows that part of the screen is a video and will actually stream it with a different codec. It's amazing. I'm actually able to, remotely, like from a hotel or something, RDP into my home computer, and I can actually watch a video over it. It's amazing.
This takes it one step further, and you're not RDPing the whole operating system, right, the whole desktop. You're just RDPing that application in the window contents.
Exactly. So the cool thing is that you can also do it from iPad. You can do it from wherever. You can do it on OS 10. So you basically are remoting a single application on your screen, but you get all the RDP benefits. So anyway, remote app, it was, a lot of people were pretty attached to it. It was kind of a hassle because this thing had to be able to scale up and down, and there were just some challenges around that. I don't think that's why it would be deprecated, though. I'm guessing there's a couple reasons, and one is probably because, Microsoft and Citrix are partners. So this could be, hey, you guys are a good partner. Why are we competing in this space? It just seems silly at this point. And then the other thing would just be from a technological perspective, like if Citrix is just killing it in this technology, just doing an amazing job, then why not just say, why are we both putting effort into trying to do this? We'll just help you make your product great. So that could be some of the motivation. I don't know, I definitely don't have any insight into what the numbers were. Maybe they're just, relatively speaking, maybe many people weren't using remote app. I don't know. So I'm totally speculating.
Yeah. So there was a kind of a follow-up article to this by somebody who's obviously a remote app fan, Jeff Duncan, and he kind of had 7 reasons why remote app retirement is bad.
Yeah.
He said it's bad for small businesses. Small businesses, they don't have the IT staff. This is a great way to shift their apps up into Azure and kind of depend upon Microsoft more. Two, going with Microsoft's vision, mobile first, cloud first. This technology really fit that.
Yeah.
And basically his third one was revenue. He says, we make software, we don't babysit servers. And that's kind of what this did. It allowed you to make software and put it up there and, basically pay Microsoft to do all the hosting and stuff for us. So essentially take our money.
Yeah.
And I'm going to skip down a little bit. Remote app was too young, and that hasn't been out very long.
Yeah.
Number 6, security. Security's hard. But all the stuff lived on the server. We didn't actually access any of the stuff. So if somebody's device got taken, there's nothing really to steal. Right. Because and one that he didn't mention on here. Now, of course, now that I mentioned that, there's something I was going to add. Whoever's used Citrix apps in the past, to me, it's kind of like installing the Java framework. It's just something you do because you have to, but it makes your computer feel all icky afterwards.
Yeah.
Now, granted, that's an opinion of mine, but I've had a lot of issues with the Citrix software. So to me, them saying just use Citrix isn't a happy feeling.
Yeah. Well, and that's understandable. I just, we haven't really evaluated both technologies either. So I guess I don't want to jump to any big conclusions. I mean, they just might've been just totally kicking ass, and
maybe they got something in the lineup that's really like, remote app wasn't going to compete against that.
Yeah, exactly. I really don't know. And they could be doing their back end stuff on Azure. So again, it's like, why have two companies doing the exact same thing when, they're just better together? I don't know. So we'll just have to wait and see kind of how that plays out. I feel bad for anybody who was on the remote app train. I mean, it's never easy for anybody, but it was just, I'm sure that was a really hard decision, but it was something that probably had to be done. Okay. Alphabet learns that change isn't as easy as ABC.
That's a very clever clickbaity title, but so about a year ago, Google renamed not renamed, but created a holding company for all of its subsidiaries called Alphabet.
Yep.
And really the founders moved up to that company and placed other people in charge as CEOs of the several other companies, including Google.com and a few of the others. And that happened about a year ago. And this is kind of like, where is Google now? How is it doing? Has this really benefited or changed Google in any substantial way? And the answer is things seem to be kind of going as they were beforehand.
Yeah.
Google's making almost all the money, and it's making it almost entirely on ads, and everybody else is spending money.
Yeah, the most interesting thing, I mean, I had this feeling that they might have even stated this, was that they were splitting these out so that, from a financial perspective, you could kind of see like, here are the moneymakers and here are the things that aren't making money. But, there's a big downside to that as well. I mean, we know that things like Xbox didn't make money forever. And now it actually does. It's one of those. Yeah. And Bing was another one. Those are the types of things where you have to make this investment where that you might not get paid for a decade. And Wall Street does not like those types of things. They want you to make money in 90 days, not in 10 years. So Google was in a position where they could hide all of those things and be like, no, we're totally making lots of money in the next 90 days. And they were totally truthful in that. And then 10 years, they could be like, oh, this one thing? Yeah, by the way, that's been losing money for 10 years, but it's cool now because now it's making money. So now they've become more transparent. But this could just really hurt them, I would think, because they're going to get pressure from investors to, shut down project X, Y, and Z. You like that? Because people say, well, hey, these things aren't profitable, even if Google has a lot of confidence in it and maybe it's the right thing to do. I don't know. It just seems like this is going to blow up in their face at some point.
Or not.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, what is
Yeah.
it? Like 9 out of 10 businesses fail, right?
Yeah.
So nine of
But
their businesses are going to fail.
so, while we did talk about a lot of the stuff did get spun out,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that's still hidden in the Google corporation, such
Yeah.
as YouTube, Android, Chrome, uh, even some mobile research divisions. So
Yep.
there's still a lot that's within that core Google thing that
Yep.
aren't as transparent. So
They're still playing the game. Still playing the game, man. Okay. Anything else on that one?
no,
Okay. Y Combinator tech stacks.
yeah. So I like there's a website called madewith.com. So you can pretty much type in like any other website and it'll tell you like what their tech stack is. And I find it really useful to just see, hey, what's going on, what's popular, or, just being curious on a developer side. And Y Combinator is known for, bringing up these startups and, helping them grow. So, what is the last, couple hundred startups that Y Combinator has had? What kind of tech stacks do they use for hosting, analytics, email, and all that stuff? And there's some things that are kind of obvious and a few other things that, were a little bit surprising. So, maybe a few of the obvious things is like, I think 99% of them all use Gmail and Google Analytics.
Yeah, 97. Well, yeah, sure. But breaking those out, 97% use Gmail, which is, wow. I mean, that's a trend right there. That's really interesting. 55% use AWS, 13 use Cloudflare, 6% use Rackspace. It's really disappointing that Azure did not make that list.
Well, if you look at that too, they didn't make the list, but there's also a big gap in numbers. Like, there's room for Azure to have some space in there.
Yeah. It could be other, and it could be the second biggest. The thing is though, Microsoft always throws out some stats, every once in a while. Satya does and other things. So, there is a lot of startup activity on Azure, but obviously whenever you look in this particular niche, it's not really a big thing, which is just disappointing.
But like another thing that, we've been told for years that, like a lot of the successful companies do A/B testing.
Yeah.
Well, this says only 20% of Y Combinator startups are using A/B testing.
Yep. It's funny, you picked out some of the same things I did. And one of them here, 93% use Optimizely, which the reason that stat stood out to me is I'd never heard of it. But 93% of these companies are using it. So I actually looked around on their website a little bit. This might actually be a good future MS Dev Show episode, honestly. I mean, if 93% of the Y Combinator companies are using that, then I think we should talk to them. Oh, this was another interesting too. Google versus Microsoft. 130 YC sites advertise on AdWords, while 22 use Bing. So a pretty good showing there, in my opinion, by Bing. Who's obviously like a kind of a distant second at this point, yet profitable. And even with this heavy Google crowd, you still see I think that's a respectable number. 22 of those companies using Bing.
Yeah.
I think that was about it. Anything else that you really pulled out? Yeah, Google Analytics, like you mentioned, was just insane. Like that's what everybody uses. It's just like no contest. I wonder, are we giving Google like so much aggregated data there from Google Analytics? I'm wondering what they use that for. I mean, man, who has a better view of what's going on the entire internet?
Yeah, they have that space just wrapped up.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, should we move on?
Mm-hmm.
Diversity in tech companies.
Yeah, so there was a little infograph on informationisbeautiful.net just showing kind of the breakdown of male and female and ethnicity amongst the top tech companies, and those were all broken out, and then compared them to the top 50 US companies as well as the most female-friendly companies. And, obviously we as a tech industry are kind of behind. We don't have the male-female parity, nor do we have the ethnicity parity as other industries do.
Yeah.
But what I thought was kind of interesting too is where some of the companies that were doing good in one area, they were really trailing in the other.
That's
where I looked at Pandora, they had 49% females working there, which is great. But if you look, they're almost all white.
Yeah. Yeah, you're
And
right.
some of the other ones that were doing really good with some of the ethnicities, they're doing the worst on the male female.
So there's really no company that like has totally nailed
Yeah.
diversity in like every possible regard. It's
Yeah.
always that they probably focus on one area and then and it's almost at the expense of something else.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
And when you look at it, they also compare all of these to the U.S. Congress, and tech companies almost match up to like what the U.S. Congress is: 19% female to 80% male, and then just a speckling of the ethnicities.
Yeah. Wow, man, the Asians are just killing it here. Because I love this. They actually have the US population, what the breakdown is. 4% Asian, but man, you go through pretty much every company is is doing really well in that category, except for HP for some reason. Come on, HP, what's your deal? Yeah, this is great. Obviously having this data out there is awesome. I think a lot of this gets self-reported, and I know a lot of people would love to have more detail. Actually, can you click on these? Oh no, you can't. It just makes it bigger. It'd be great to be able to dive into this as well. So that you could just sort of keep exploring this data and dive into and see what some of the core issues are. So,
Yeah, but the most important thing is not only that we have this, but that people with power can actually act on that and improve the system.
yep, and it's a awesome visualization. Okay, ask an intern. The best advice I got from a seven Microsoft All Stars this summer. This is awesome because I had an intern this summer that was in this group. And actually, the first thing you might notice here, and I wasn't sure. It's funny because most of the interns like they don't talk about this much, and I'm not sure why. I don't know if they were told not to, but I'm just going to repeat it because it is in here. Is that like they got to do tons of fun stuff. First of all, which I'm pretty jealous of, like scavenger hunt and what else was listed here.
Didn't they get like a concert too?
Well, that's the thing. They got a private Ellie Goulding concert in front of the Space Needle. And then they all got Surface Books, which wasn't in here. So hopefully I'm not like spilling the beans on that. I wasn't told to not say that though, but they all got Surface Books. So they sure had an awesome experience, and they're given a ton of freedom too. I mean, she went through, I love it because she's an amazing writer. I mean, this is
a long post.
yeah, and it's amazing. Like, man, this would be another good person to have on
So
the
essentially,
show.
I think that the topic, what this was, is they were recommended to like go out once a week and just have lunch or coffee or something with somebody at Microsoft
Yeah.
and just kind of, get to know them, do a little interview, just get some advice, which is
Yeah.
exactly what you want during an internship. And I think the one thing that wasn't mentioned in here, but I know this is something that me and you, Jason, have really learned throughout doing this episode, doing the podcast, is if you ask people for things, people want to help you.
Yeah.
And we've found out that we've gotten just tons of support from just everybody, whether it be, somebody helping us with, something technically, artistically, or getting people to be guests on the show. Everybody, for the most part, helps if you ask.
Yeah.
And I know that this person was kind of shocked at some of the people that they were able to go out to lunch with.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of good stuff in here. Don't assume that everyone is as passionate as you. So it has all the names in here. So that's software developer and office engineering. But she also got to talk to.
That's actually a really good one because I know I've made that mistake before. My first job in the tech industry was absolutely not normal. I had awesome coworkers who had tons of passion, and I didn't realize that the rest of the industry wasn't set up like that. We were constantly teaching each other and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until a couple of years later that I realized that there's a lot of developers out there that they treat their job like they're working in a factory.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're not into software as a craft.
Yeah.
And that was an eye opener for me. I didn't know what to do with that when I first came across that. So, realizing that people have different passion levels is sometimes something that you need to be made aware of.
Yeah. So we'll let the listeners read the rest of these, but I mean, she was able to talk to Chris Capicella. He's pretty approachable. Scott Hanselman. Let's see, Catherine Harris, a technical evangelist for AR and VR. Yeah, I mean, it's just awesome. Principal program manager of the HoloLens, which that one is kind of interesting too, because she's like, well, I couldn't meet him in his office because I don't know, you need like, it's like the movies, you need like the iris scanner and the, the fingerprint and all that kind of stuff, because of all the top secret stuff, but really cool. So I recommend reading that. She'd be a good guest on the show as well. How to be mediocre and be happy with yourself. So this was kind of an interesting read because it's talking about goals. Like you should aspire for greatness, but then this is the quote right here. Mediocrity as a goal sucks, but as a result is okay. And it's okay to be happy with that.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times we hear, especially in our field, about like the rockstar programmer or the 10X developer or something like that. And one that is kind of a myth for the most part. I mean, there are some people who are just standouts in the field, but when you hear like places that like we only hire those kinds of people, well, that doesn't happen. You can't sustain that.
Yeah. Well, and people have pointed out like mathematically, like every company can't hire the top 1%, because it just doesn't work like that.
The other 99% would be
yeah, the other 99% would be unemployed. Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes when you see that, like, you come to realize like, hey, I'm not this awesome person, that can get to a person psychologically. And, it's just coming around to it. It's like, hey, I may not have like kicked that butt, or I don't know this technology like that person, but, I kicked some really hard problems this week and, I got some stuff done.
Yeah, and I've been listening to a lot of James Whitaker recently, and we're gonna we'll have an episode with him. We're gonna have an episode with him live in a bar. We're trying to figure that, or trying to line that up. But he talks about career superpowers, and one of his biggest things is to specialize. And I see that all the time. If you can be the whatever person, insert blank, whatever word you want to put in there. If you can be that person, you can do what you want. So it's not even that you have to be, that's what I struggle with. It's like, okay, I want to be awesome at everything. Well, you can't do that. You have to specialize. And I almost have a job where I'm not allowed to, well, I shouldn't say I'm not allowed to specialize, where I'm expected to know like a little bit about everything, which makes it, it just puts a strain on trying to specialize. But, you want to specialize.
But in that case, your specialty is learning at that point.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I guess what I'm saying then too is, on majority of the things, like it's okay to be mediocre, if you're mediocre at everything, or it's okay. And I think there is a difference between a goal and what you actually do. But success can be mediocre. That's the thing. We treat mediocre as a bad thing, but it could just be average or whatever, however you want to define that. So just kind of an interesting thought. Self-driving cars don't care about your moral dilemmas. So this one personally just drives me absolutely nuts. So, this always comes up whenever you talk about self-driving cars. A car has to make a decision at some point. Should I kill the family of 3? Should I kill, these 5 people that don't have a family? Like,
the bus of elementary kids.
Yeah, exactly. And I was listening to This Week in Tech, and I was kind of yelling at my radio because it was just driving me crazy. Because like Leo on there, he's like, no, he's like, the software shouldn't make that decision. It should slam on the brakes and hope for the best, just like a human would. And I'm like, you don't get it at all. And it's this. I'm sure developers listening have run into this quite a bit, where you're writing some code and you write an if statement, and then you have an else, okay, or you have a try catch. And in that else or in that catch, you have to write some code, and you go to your boss and you're like, what should the software do in this case? And they go, oh, don't worry. Like that shouldn't happen. It's like, well, in my code, it can. It can. It can happen. So when it happens, then what should I do? So there's slamming on the brakes and hoping for the best doesn't make sense. So, I mean, at some point, these self-driving cars, they need extreme awareness about what's around them. There's no choice, right? They have to know, just like when you're driving, and they'll actually be better But, whenever you're driving, you're looking in front of you. You have an idea of everything that's in front of you. I always keep track of everything that's around me. But the computer in your car will know every detail about what's going on in all the vehicles around you, exact distances, all of this. So when something happens, like a bus falls from the overpass and you have to turn left or you have to turn right, the car is going to have to make a decision there. And sure, you have other choices, slam on the brakes, but the car at that point, and this is what I don't think Leo understood, if you slam on the brakes and hope for the best, the car knows before it puts on the brakes, you will just die and you're going to kill half the people on the bus. Like, it knows that as a 100% certainty based on that information.
So here's where I'm going to disagree with you to a point.
Okay.
So the point is if it gets to the part where it's like, kill the baby in the baby stroller or the grandmother.
Yeah.
That means that it wasn't able to do its job a few seconds beforehand. It made a mistake beforehand.
No, a bus just fell off the overpass, man. I know what the article. So the article says that. The article, I think, totally skirts the issue.
Well, if a bus falls off an overpass, there's nothing that anything can do, no matter what kind of advance.
What I'm saying is you can turn left or you can turn right.
Well, I'm just saying using your scenario, you can always take it one step further. You can always take it, I'm going to throw this other condition on here that would make it impossible. I mean,
and we have to make a decision, is my point.
Well, no. So where I was going to go,
sure, go ahead.
Beyond that is there gets to be a point where, one, you can't make that decision. You can throw enough at it where something is going to be inevitable at some point.
Sure.
But
that's not what I'm talking about. But go ahead.
But the other thing is like, a lot of times when you get into those spots too, like, all right, I realize that something's going to happen, and no matter what happens, I have to make a decision between ruining this and ruining that. And by the time you get to that point and you have to calculate all these other things, one, we don't have the sensors with the data inflow to do that, nor will we get those in anytime soon. And by the time that you actually do make that calculation, it's probably beyond that point anyways.
Okay, so here's my point. I'm going to say it really succinctly. There will be a car at a certain point, and I'm just going to say that there's going to be at least one, because I know there'll be more than one, but there will be at least one that gets put into a situation where it has two choices. It's able to pick one of those choices. It is under its control, and it has to make a decision like that. It will happen. To say that will never happen, I think, is silly. So it will happen, and we have to write code to deal with that.
All right. You've made your thing.
Right. So I think that point, I get what you're saying. And the problem I have with most people talking about this is they keep avoiding the issue. They keep saying, "Oh, well, most of the time this will happen." I get it. This is in the catch or the else. If nothing we can do, then do this. Else, else means okay, we have a choice. So in our else, like, we have to write some code. Like, if we don't write code, the car, I don't know, I guess it's just gonna like turn off. Which, then it'll just say like, "Oh, I'm going to kill you." Because again, the bus fell off the overpass, and I don't know, it's a 1-lane road, and we have, the baby in a carriage over here pushed by the mom, and over here we have, dad playing with his son. Like we know what the car knows exactly what's going on. It's got to turn left or right or kill or kill 10 people. Well, the 10 people seems horrible. So now we're based on another decision, and I don't know. I think it's going to be like iRobot. The robot jumped into the water. It did, that robot said, "Oh, you have what was it? You have a 90% chance of survival." And the two people that were in that car, they only had a 20% chance of survival. Even though there were two of them, you had a 90% chance. So I saved you. I think that's what's going to end up happening. And that's going to be tough.
Yeah. So we have Jason's opinion, and then we have what the article said that interviewed a few people who are working at Google on these cars.
Who should know more than me, by the way.
Well, their point is they've never come across that situation, and they believe that if they got into that situation, that's because they screwed up ahead of time.
I don't get that. Like, they really think that if they ever have a choice, that it will be, there would have been sensor data leading up to it, and they wrote bad code. Like, really? That's why I think the article, is just total garbage. That's my opinion. So, but I'd like to have some feedback though. If you guys want to send in some emails, I'd like to hear your take on it. But I just think that's crazy. Of course, we want it to be rare. Like we know that right now, what is it, 40,000 people a year in the U.S. die in car accidents. Like we want that to be, 10, right? And it's going to be like extremely fluke accidents. Like an airplane is going to crash on your car. Like I get that. So people are still going to die and there's nothing you can do about that. But, they're going to be in this situation. So anyway, I won't talk about it to death, so to speak.
Infragistics, ultimate UX and UI tools, and enterprise mobility solutions, SharePlus and ReportPlus, enable high-performance apps on any device, faster data insights, simplified collaboration, and market-leading security, all backed by comprehensive support. With Infragistics' ultimate UX and UI development toolkit, you can ensure mission-critical applications delivering a superior user experience on the desktop, web, and native device environments for iOS and Android. With the latest BI tools, wow your users with dashboards providing the data insights that they need when and where they need it, all at a low total cost of ownership. Try it today. Download a free trial at Infragistics.com and follow them for the latest updates in UX and UI development, reporting, and collaboration at Infragistics on Twitter. And remember, each week, if we pick your comment on the show, you will get a free copy of Infragistics' Ultimate UX and UI toolset.
Let's see here. What do we got? Machine learning meets ketosis. How to effectively lose weight. This was fascinating. This was
awesome. Really cool. And part of this is I'm constantly fascinated by machine learning because I don't understand it. But I constantly get, a little bit more and a little bit more, and I understand it better every time that I'm presented with something new. And what was really cool is what this guy did with the project is he essentially just recorded everything that he did and everything that he ate. It wasn't like, if you look at it, it wasn't like I had 1/8 cup of cottage cheese or something like that. But he just said like cottage cheese, good sleep, or slept bad. I mean, it was just real high level.
Yeah, this isn't like drop down list. This is just free form, just type.
And he wrote a machine learning to just kind of go over. And one of the other things he did is record his weight every day, and it kind of associated all these different inputs with whether he gained or lost weight over that period. And over time, it was able to, give him a bunch of recommendations based upon what he put in. And some of them really kind of, in my opinion, having looked at some of these like low carb, paleo, all these kind of newer diets, really giving them a little bit more credence, because they were saying when he ate things that were higher in fat and he got sleep and he did exercise and he stayed away from low carb, or he stayed away from carbs, he tended to lose weight. And when he started eating sweets and things that were very carby or missed sleep, then he started gaining weight.
Yeah.
And it really just kind of, for him, he said this wasn't, very extensive, but, he was able to see a lot of associations that he's been able to kind of, take that advice, live it personally, and get more feedback in through the system.
Yeah.
So this was really, really cool.
I think the graph is the most telling, right? So he actually basically sorted each label and how much weight, I shouldn't say how much, but how much of a correlation there was on weight loss. So sleep was by far the biggest factor. And then then like number 2 was like egg, like when you eat eggs, and then olive oil, olives. It was just really interesting. And then weight gain, like the worst one was no sleep. And then bagel, meatball, brownie, pizza. Like you could say like, oh, well, of course. But this is awesome. I mean, this is like mathematical machine learning, associating these things together.
And I know you're a fan of this, but he mentioned he noticed like on the days that he skipped breakfast, that all of a sudden got a high correlation with sleep loss or weight loss.
Yeah, absolutely, whenever you're fasting. Let's skip to the rest of the news if that's all right. I wanted to jump into some stuff, and actually, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to skip a couple of these things. So let's talk about 2 big things. So one of them is going to be home automation. The other will be like travel tips. So those are my 2 big categories. So the first one, so I've been playing around with this because I know on the show we've talked about IoT and home automation, and I've always bought like a whole bunch of stuff, and it's never really done anything useful for me. And I was just getting to this level of frustration because in my new house here, like we don't have air conditioning because the weather out here in Seattle is a little bit different. But this, you still get like infrequent hot days out here. And we have a 2-story house. And of course, all the bedrooms are on the top story and all the heat goes upstairs. And I want to be able to sleep good. And we actually have like I wouldn't call it a whole house fan, but we have a fan upstairs. It turns out it's actually like a bathroom fan in the hallway that helps vent out air. And it was just on this dumb timer. I think it would run from like 7 to 10 p.m. and then it would run from like 4 to 7 p.m. in the morning. And I was like, okay, there's got to be a better way to do this. Like, I don't want this running when it doesn't make sense. So I know I was chatting with you guys for a little bit, and I was like looking for a sophisticated rule engine where I could do these things, and just everything really fell short because I wanted it to be something that was simple, yet I could get like, create like super complex rules. And I really wanted to be able to do this in code. So I have a Smart Things hub. And you can buy these things. I think they're $100, and it's got like Bluetooth and I don't know if it has Bluetooth actually, but it's got Zigbee. It'll connect to all your devices basically, and you can buy all these off the shelf devices like motion sensors and door brake sensors and alarms and stuff like that, and kind of piece together all these things. But again, it's just, I was never able to set up anything very sophisticated. It used to be the most complicated rule I had was when this motion sensor sees motion, like turn on this light, and it would stop working at some point. It was just really frustrating. So here's what I did. So Smart Things has this concept of a smart app, and a smart app, is it's basically you end up writing code and you have a number of inputs in it, and then you have logic that you run. And I'm like, okay, this is what I'm looking for. And, I had some misfires, but this was exactly what I was looking for. So I actually created some code, and it's nice because you go in and you actually say, hey, I want you to give me, for the whole house fan, I wanted to know 2 different temperature sensors, right? I wanted a temperature sensor that represented the inside of my house, one that represented the outside, and then I had a fan that I wanted to control. But you don't really want to bind to those specific devices. So what you do is you define inputs, and you define them through their characteristics. So if you look at my code, it makes a lot more sense, but basically you select those sensors as inputs, and then you specify which fan you want to control. Now,
so how does this work? I mean, you mentioned code, you mentioned an app, you mentioned your stuff. So is there an app? Do I download that? How do I get my code into that app? I mean,
yeah, great question. So there's 2 different pieces of this. So first of all, like all of this runs on their infrastructure, but it uses your hardware. And I'm not sure exactly how all of those, how all of that complexity works. And the reality is it doesn't really matter. You don't have to worry about it too much. But the way that you actually do this, there is an app for your phone, but the app for your phone is really for like checking device stat. Like I can tell what the temperature sensor values are and all that good stuff. But for doing anything kind of real hardcore as far as code, you can't do any of that on your app. So what you do, there's basically, they have like a graph API that you access. It's something like api.something.smartthings.com. If you go out there and you go to the developer section in their documentation, like it's pretty easy to find that URL. And as long as you have a SmartThings account, I think you could do this even if you don't have SmartThings. I don't think it requires a hub, but I'm not sure about that. So you go out there and you basically create one of these things. And they're essentially Java code. They're in something called Groovy, which I really wasn't familiar with. But it's, I don't know, it's code. So whatever, it's a C-based language. So I haven't had any issues with it. But yeah, I mean, they have a syntax for defining the things that go in, and you basically do it on this online page. You paste it into this big editor, you save it, you publish it. And then what's cool about it is you can actually, instead of using real sensors, you can use simulated sensors. So you can sit there and actually modify temperatures and turn things on and off. And what's cool is it's all event driven. So basically anytime one of those temperature sensor changes for me, I trigger my script again. So my first script is the one for running the house fan. So that script, like I said, it takes the indoor temperature, takes the outdoor temperature. If the outdoor temperature is below the indoor temperature, it in the summer, it says actually this one, sorry, this one was for the house fan. That was actually one of the few scripts that I found that I was able to download. So let's talk about a different one that's probably even simpler. So I have another one for equalizing the temperature in my house. So I have, two different floors. I have my thermostat is downstairs. So that is one temperature sensor. I actually have a motion sensor upstairs, and the motion sensor from SmartThings actually doubles as a temperature sensor. So if the temperature is different between those two sensors by more than 5 degrees, and I actually have it set up as configurable, it will then, and it checks every time one of those temperature changes, my code gets called to run that, do that little math formula. Then it turns on the furnace fan to help equalize the house temperature. So if it's really hot upstairs and cold downstairs, it tries to equal those things out. And the code is actually incredibly simple once you get used to it.
So these are groovy files that you're writing?
Yeah, they're groovy files. Yep. And again, I have them right on GitHub.
So for those who aren't familiar, what is groovy?
Well, it's like a Java type thing. I don't know. It's like a scripting language for Java. That's about all I know about it. But you don't have to know Groovy. You don't have to know Java. I didn't know either of those things really. And I was able to write one of these scripts. And hopefully, like my script will help you. If you wanted to create one of these things, you can actually just paste it in there, change the name and some of the other things on your API dashboard, and just save it out there. And then once just saving it out there, like it just runs then. And it just keeps going. And what's nice is you don't have to go out there and find like a cloud provider and like run your code. I played around with Azure Functions to try to like build something out of it, but this is great because it all runs like in the context of your home automation system. Like they run it for you, and it just works. Like I don't have to deal with it anymore. Once I put those rules into place, it just worked. So I did have to switch out the timer for a switch for the whole house fan, so that it's a Z-Wave switch that I can control. So yeah, I have one of these is for running the house fan. One is for equalizing the house temperature. And then the other one is the one that checks the inside and outside temperature. It's sort of like the house fan one, except what it does is it remembers the state. You also have some state management in there. It remembers whether or not our windows are open or closed, because they're not automatic or anything, but it actually sends us a notification in the morning. We don't know at which time it starts getting hotter outside than on the inside. So when that actually happens in the script, it will actually send us a notification saying close the windows. And then later in the day, it'll tell us when to open the windows. So we actually get the maximum amount of time that we can keep our windows open at night to pull in all the cold air. Because here in Seattle, even when it's like, we had some days that were in the 80s, inside, or I should say, at night, it was in the 50s. So, we have plenty of cool air. You have to capture it and claim it. And as long as you hang on to it, then you're good to go.
So really the minimum that you need is a SmartThings hub
for $100.
Right?
Yep.
And then you need some stuff that can connect to it that's either controls things or is sensors.
Yep.
Just to get some things. And then you can control it all with these groovy files that run off of their infrastructure.
Exactly. Yeah, and they tend to interface with just about everything. Like you can go out there and see all the things that they talk to. Like
So it would probably talk to my Nest.
Okay, so did I tell you the drama with that? So
no, you didn't.
So I bought a Nest this time. I had a radio thermostat, which was like this open thing. I thought it was a great concept. And it was just frustrating because I'm like, oh, well, it's not, everybody talks about Nest all the time, and Nest, talks to everything. Here's the thing. They have a horrible like terms of service for their API. So most companies like can't touch their stuff just because of the terms of service around their API. Like that's just the way they are. Okay. So SmartThings has to do this little thing where they're like, yeah, we don't talk to Nest. We did write some code that's over there, that will do it, but it's like we can't do it. Hint, hint, like go use that code. So what you end up having to do is you basically take their code from GitHub, in that you really don't have to even understand the code to do this. You copy their code and you end up pasting it into the same API dashboard that I was talking about as a device handler. And it basically gives you the ability then to add a Nest thermostat, and you get like a nice, you can control it and read it because it's pretty easy. That's the beautiful thing about SmartThings. It's a framework for talking to things and controlling things.
So you put a switch on your whole house fan
Yep.
because you had to, but mine's integrated in on my Nest thermostat. So if I copy and pasted that file, I should have access through Nest to do that.
Yeah. So what it'll do is let's say you use the whole house fan example. It will ask you. It'll say, "Hey, what fan should we turn on and off?" And as long as your thermostat is controlling a fan, it will show up as a possible like output.
Nice.
Yeah, which is really cool. They have like, I think there's like 80 or 100 different device characteristics they have. There's things that can be turned on and off. There's things that can read temperature. There's things that can read humidity. There's things that can be polled to update. And that was the other challenge with this too, is I have a weather, like sort of a weather virtual device on here. And for whatever reason, I don't know why SmartThings hasn't fixed this, but any kind of outdoor weather widget you get on here, like they don't update. You have to like manually force them to update. Why need the current weather for this thing to be meaningful? So I actually wrote, it's actually built into one of my smart apps. I don't remember which one it was in. I think it was in the open close, the windows, just because that one I needed the outdoor temperature. I actually have a timer in there that fires every 15 minutes and it talks to that other one. It says, one of the inputs into that script is give me a polling device. and basically if you give it a polling device, it'll call the polling device and say, "Hey, you please poll." So it's basically calling the weather widget saying, "Please update the weather." So anyway, it's been like, now that I have it all in place using the code that I have on GitHub, like it's been ultra reliable and it's been an absolute like game changer, because just that notification about when to open and close the windows has changed our comfort level. Equalizing the house temperature has been great. And then also running that fan at night to really maximize that. So this is really making me want to get into this more, because it's like, okay, I can write some code in this browser here, and then I don't have to worry about where to host it. I don't have to worry about what I actually maintain or anything like that. And if any sensors die or I swap anything out, I just go into the settings and I say, you know what, this is actually the new temperature sensor and this is what you're going to control. And that's it. So I like it.
So it sounds like it's pretty developer friendly, but
yes.
What are your opinions on how long it's going to stay around? Because there have been other things out for home automation and stuff like that have just all of a sudden up and gone one day. So I mean, we're still at the stage where you know.
Well, those were specialized. Yeah, those were specialized things, and I think that whole way of doing things is just a losing proposition. That's why they're gone. I think that Nest's attitude is going to hurt them in the long term. SmartThings, it doesn't. It's very unopinionated. It wants to talk to everything. Period. If you have anything that can be read from or controlled, you can write an adapter for it. If you built your own thing, you can control it. If it's just IP based or whatever, if it's Wi-Fi, it doesn't matter. They want to talk to it, and you can write the code to make that happen. So there's only a couple companies that do that. So I think Wink is another one. And then I think I saw something at Lowe's. I don't know if they're yet another one. But SmartThings is owned by Samsung. Samsung is making a huge IoT play. So I think we got that going for us.
So this isn't a little rinky-dink company. This has got like a huge company behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I don't know. They've been around for years. Yeah, owned by a big company. So I don't know. I guess I'm pretty confident that they're going to stay around. And then I know we talked before about like my security cameras online, but since we're talking about home automation, I did want to talk about that some more. Because I'm not sure how much I talked about some of the alerting in that. So I use software called Blue Iris, and I dove into that a little bit more, and I was really underutilizing Blue Iris. So you can obviously record whenever you see motion, but they also have this concept of triggers, which that's what actually triggers the recording of motion. But then there's this concept of alerts, and alerts can be even more sophisticated. And then I've also set up geofencing, and I'll explain why I'm jumping around here. But I set up geofencing. So basically our security camera system knows when I'm home. It knows if it's day or night, and it knows when I'm away. So, and when I say when I'm away, it means when me and my wife are both away, because our phones are no longer near the system, basically geofenced. So when we are home, every time my kids walk out on the deck, I don't want to get some alarm. But and then also like, beside my house, I don't, if the kids are playing there, I don't want the phone going bzz, 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 like I just don't want that. So what ends up happening is there are certain things that send an alert to me. Like if you walk basically up, 15 feet in front of my front door and you're walking toward the front door, my phone any time of the day will actually play a doorbell sound. And I'll get alert on the phone, and it's great. There's been so many times when I've been somewhere else and I get that alert and I flip right away, and right away I see like, here's what's going on in front of your front door. Somebody delivering a package or whatever. That is awesome. And then,
so how does that work? I can see like it would detect something, but
yep.
Does it give you like a notification where you can get that live stream or an image, or, what do you get with that alarm?
Yeah. So the notification is just a regular iOS notification, but when I swipe it away to like, activate it, then it opens up the app and takes me directly to that video stream.
So they have an iOS app as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you for asking the question. And then if my wife and I are both away, then it basically arms the system. So then if somebody walks in my side yard, which is in a fence, or if there's motion on my back, the deck, my phone will actually like it'll sound like an alarm.
Mm-hmm.
And I could trigger this in with like my smart app, and I could buy like an actual alarm thing. But right now, my biggest issue right now is just false alarms. So we get shadows from trees on our back deck, and I think we're actually just going to cut down all the trees, so that'll probably fix that problem. But so I get some false alarms. So I'll be going down the road, and all of a sudden, and it like, brings the stereo volume down. I hear, reet, reet, reet. My kids are like, what's going on? They're like all freaking out. But it works good, so I get a couple false alarms, but I guess I'd rather have it be that way than the other way. So yeah, that's, it paid to dive into that system and get used to that. The front door notification, to me is super useful, because I know you can buy like these different doorbells that will, somebody pushes the button and you can do something real similar. But I actually get that doorbell sound before they get to the door. So all of a sudden my phone will ding, and then like a second later, the front door will ring. Or sometimes it's like 2 seconds and I've already actually looked at them. I can see like, oh, this is who's here. Like it's UPS. I don't have to rush to the door. Or the other day, this neighbor, and it was just kind of creepy. She walked in front of it. It did that. And then I think she was just trying to look in the window to see if we were home before she rang the doorbell. So she was just standing there. So I went and opened the door. I'm like, yes. So, we knew that she was there. So if you have somebody creepy that's like, trying to look in your windows or something, like I know ahead of time. So it's just super cool. So Blue Iris is the glue that makes all of that happen.
So is that a subscription then, or is that something you paid for?
$60 lifetime. Well, I shouldn't say lifetime. $60 for that version. So then version 4, I've only had to go through one upgrade. It used to be version 3, but they usually add like so many compelling features that you want to upgrade. So yeah, we'll have links to some of those things in the show notes, including those scripts and the software and all that good stuff. And then the last thing here that I figured we'd talk about, I was like, okay, what could I talk about that might be interesting to people? So the last one here is just, I was trying to think if there were any kind of travel tips that I could provide for people. And honestly, like I don't have a lot, but I think I can provide some insight into some things, because you can always just, go into Bing or Google or whatever and say, travel tips. And I don't know, usually what they give you is really stupid. But I'll give you a couple tips here anyway. And these are in no particular order. So the first one is whenever you're flying on an airplane, and I see a lot of people make this mistake, and they'll make it over and over again. And sometimes they do it intentionally, but basically if you're not in just like regular economy, if you are able to get into like Comfort Plus, or you get an upgrade to first class or whatever, if you can, try to get a seat in the back of that section. So not in the back of the plane, but in the back of that section. So like on Delta, there's a whole Comfort Plus section. Get a seat in the back of Comfort Plus. And the reason is because then if you don't get on the plane immediately, you're very likely, you have a whole option. You have a lot of options as far as overhead space. And I see people do this where they'll be in the front seat in like, Economy Plus, and they'll get on the plane last. And they get on the plane there and they have to go back like halfway back the plane, put their luggage on. Well, guess what? Whenever you land, you're not getting off the plane. You have to wait for everybody to get off so that you can walk back and grab your luggage. Unless some people take mercy on you and pass it up.
And another thing with that too is a lot of times at the beginning of those sections, a lot of times that's where they'll store like things that the plane needs,
Yeah.
like oxygen containers, emergency
Yeah.
supplies, or things that just the flight crew uses.
Yep.
I remember once, I think I was actually the first person on the plane,
Yeah.
and I grabbed the first seat in the first section. Luckily, I didn't have anything on me, but the person I was sitting next to was trying to put something in, and like the entire first overhead cabin container was full of stuff.
Yeah.
So that happens.
Yeah, in those bulkhead seats of the first row, if it's a bigger plane, they'll have a wall there, and you won't be able to even put anything under your seat. So you could be in this nightmare situation where you can't put anything under your seat, can't put anything in the overhead. Good
But
luck.
you do get leg room.
Yeah, but you get leg room. That's about it. Another one. So I end up. Well, I travel half of what I used to, but I used to travel quite a bit. As far as like rewards program, and I actually have a great tip. But first, as far as points, like you can get points through like Avis and that. And I don't know. I don't think I've ever gotten anything through Avis. They always give you like, oh, here's a free weekend rental, as if that does me any good. So I don't really have any tips there. The only points that I found that are very valuable, relatively speaking, are hotel points. So stick with one chain, and it actually doesn't matter if you stick with Marriott, Hyatt, Holiday Inn. They're all big and they all have hotels everywhere, so you can usually stay with them. But I'm with Marriott, and I travel enough that whenever I travel with my family, we always get all of our hotels for free. Because a lot of times, like I earned, man, I don't know if it was like the last year or what the exact time frame was, but like I'm sitting on over 100,000 points right now in there. I don't have a lot of airline miles or any of this other stuff, but I'm sitting on 100,000 Marriott points, and that generally will pay for like 10 free nights at a hotel for me and my family. So that's pretty significant. Plus, with the status there, I mean, I usually get free upgrades. So a lot of times I get a big room for 10,000 points.
So, I mean, how does that work if that's something that like your company pays for travel? Can you tack on like your
Absolutely.
membership then?
Absolutely. Yep. In fact, even if your company controls the entire thing, whenever you get there, just give them your number. Give them your number, and they'll associate it whenever you check in.
So that might actually just be a pro tip anyways, because even if you are doing that, it's a pain to type in that information and confirm. So
yeah, no, you should always be getting your airline points, your hotel points, all that stuff for sure. Let's see here. Ticket prices. So my point here, you're not going to beat the system. I always love this. Oh, if you buy them on a Friday at 3:32 p.m. and you lift your left arm, like, you can get like 10% off. No, this is just total crap. Here's how it works. Cause I actually worked, and I'm not going to name their name, but I worked with the company that basically does the pricing for all of the airline tickets in just about the entire world. They pretty much own that market. Here's how it works, and it's so obvious how it works too. It is really just supply and demand, but it's more than that. It's supply and demand over time. So there's a curve of how full they want the plane to be on any particular day. If you're looking at a flight that's a year from now, they probably only care if they sold one seat at this point, because they have a whole year to sell the rest of the plane, right? As you get closer, that curve goes up exponentially. The day before that flight, they want to have all those seats sold, for example. Now, wherever they are on that curve, if they're above or below it as far as number of seats sold, changes the pricing. So how are you going to guess where that curve is? I know Google Travel tries to guess it. It can sort of tell, based on just like giant trends, but I don't know. You're not really going to beat the system. They do take into account every possible signal. So, whatever they can do to figure out how much money they can get out of you. So I've heard of people, using incognito mode on a PC, because there was that whole shenanigans about, if you're on a Mac, you can pay more for airline tickets, things like that. That's what I would say would always be a good idea, to try and, send the signals that mean that you don't want to pay a lot for a ticket. Keep watching, and there's also sites that you can go to set up price alerts, so that you can see whenever the prices drop below a certain threshold, or whenever they get to a really good price. So do that if you actually have some time, but you might still get screwed over by that. Like, there might be a good price now, and it might go up the entire time. So it's just really hard to tell. This, I don't know, barely counts as a tip, but pre-check and global entry. So just to describe what those are, whenever you get to the airport, and if you want to avoid that crazy long line and you don't want to have to take all your liquids out and your shoes off and all that good stuff, if you go and get pre-check, it's about, I think it's $85 or maybe it's 80. You can whiz right through that and just go through the metal detector and all that good stuff. It only takes like 15 minutes to get it. So, if you're going to
fly how do you do that?
Get it. You have to go to certain airports. If you search for pre-check, you'll see that process. But you go in, they take your fingerprints, and they basically, the FBI does a background check. And they hand that over to the TSA. The TSA gives you a number. And then whenever you fly, whenever you book your tickets, or you have an account with like Delta or whoever, you give them what's known as your known traveler number, your KTN. And then you will get pre-check on your tickets. There's also something known as global entry. If you're going to be flying international, use global entry because it'll get you in the country super quick. You can skip these. Like I came in one time from Switzerland. There were hundreds of people in line. The coworker I was flying with, he had global entry and he got through in 10 minutes. It took me over an hour. So absolutely worth it if you're coming in from out of the country. Global entry includes pre-check. So if you think you're going to do international travel, just get global entry and then you'll basically get both. My next tip, if you're flying international, and I've seen this happen, like look at how full the plane is. If the plane isn't full, and I've run into this a couple times, so going to Australia there and back, it was very empty. And this is where I learned this because on the way there, I was in a row with some other people. And some people had an entire row to themselves and they got to lay down for the entire flight and sleep on a 12-hour flight. So on my way back, I noticed that the plane wasn't very full. So I actually requested, I said, can you put me in a row that has nobody in it? They said, sure. So I had 3 seats coming back from Australia. And basically the time we were flying was overnight in my US time zone. So I ended up laying down and there was no turbulence. So I didn't even have to wear a seatbelt. So I laid down with blankets and I slept for 8 hours. So if you can do that, it's, kind of a rare tip, but if you can take advantage of that, do that. Here's one trick that I've heard from somebody. If you're flying with one other person, and there are 3 seats next to each other, you don't book them next to each other. One of you book the aisle and one of you book the window. If there is an empty seat, whenever you get on the plane, like people, the middle seats always fill up last. So if the middle seat is still available when you get on, boom, you have 3 seats for 2 people. If somebody actually sits there, either one of you can say, hey, do you want to switch with me? And of course they're going to, because nobody likes the middle seat. So you have nothing to lose. Best case, you get extra room. Worst case, you end up with what you would have had anyway. So that's kind of a neat trick for you. Let's see here. Oh, did you put this in here? Skip the rest, yep. Carl. Actually, I have to talk about this last one here. Because this is a big deal. So there's a credit card that came out about a week ago, and I'll try to keep this short and sweet. It's a credit card that came about a week ago. People are flipping out over this card. If you are a traveler, you should get this card. So I'll give you the downside up ahead of time because you're going to freak out. $450 annual fee. Okay. But the card is still absolutely worth it. So you get, every year they give you a $300 annual travel credit. So if you pay for hotels or flights or whatever, they will give you, they'll immediately credit back that money. So basically the annual fee then is $150. And then I'll go over just some of the quick things. You get free pre-check or global entry every 4 years with this. So they will pay for it. So I was talking about that early. This card will actually pay for that for you. You get free lounge access at all the airports. And they give you 100,000 points for signing up, which is basically, if you redeem those points for travel, ends up being well over $1,500 worth of bonus. So in the first year of this thing, you get over $2,000 worth of bonus stuff for that $450 annual fee. Okay, so that I will just leave it at that for the show. Oh, that is the Chase Sapphire Rewards card. So we'll have to link to that application. Unfortunately, they don't have like a referral. But it is a heck of a card. So I've signed up. I'm just waiting for mine to arrive. Okay, Carl, we have 5 minutes. What else do you want to go over here?
So we have a few dev tips of the week. I know last episode I kind of skated out on it, so I've made up for it with having several. So the first one is feature queries in CSS. So a lot of times you might use something like Modernizer to in JavaScript, figure out if a feature exists on a browser, and then if it does, enabling it. Well, the problem is that's a script that has to load, and then that all has to happen before the CSS can be properly implemented. So what you can do in the newer browsers is use @supports in CSS. So you can see in CSS if it supports it, and then it'll conditionally apply that CSS. So that's not just useful to like turn on that feature or not, but one of the things you might want to do is if the browser supports accessing the first letter, then you might want to make it big and change the color and maybe add a margin to it. That way you can make it look like on a book that's been manually formatted. You can give it that like just a giant, leading letter to the paragraph. Mm-hmm. But if it doesn't support that, it'll just look like a normal regular size letter. And you don't want it like orange and have an extra margin if you can't make it, select it properly. So that's what's really cool that you can do with this is without that JavaScript overhead, which JavaScript isn't bad, but if we can minimize that, CSS is just blazingly fast if you can apply it right away.
Yeah, and it's declarative. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's really cool is it's like supported in Firefox and Chrome and Opera for like forever. It's in all of the versions of Edge, and it's in the newer versions of iOS, Safari, and Android. So it's something that most modern browsers can handle. Of course, IE can't, but it's just something that you should probably take a look at if you're not using. And once you just start using it, you'll probably start using it all the time.
Okay. Next tip.
For UWP apps, one of the things that you can't really do too easily is log something out to a console. A lot of times you might just do a console.writeline in code somewhere, but you can't do that. So somebody else built a service that essentially does that using app services and the remote systems API. You can just hook into it, do a console.out, and it'll redirect all that to this application, which you'll have running at the same time. So you'll have that app running and your app, and whenever it sees that app is up, it'll just marshal those things over.
So where did you find this through me?
No, I did not.
Okay, this guy's on my team. That's why I asked.
Is he?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I did not know that.
That's a cool coincidence.
Yeah. So obviously, I'm a Windows developer MVP, and this kind of made the circles in my little realm.
Yep.
So
okay, cool.
Pretty cool. And the last thing is, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I've been super into machine learning, and there's a PDF that Microsoft came out basically that'll help you get up on the basics of machine learning. So if that's something that you're interested in as well, check out the show notes, download the PDF, and it'll show you how to do it in Azure.
Okay, cool. And pick a number between 1 and 4, inclusive, Carl.
4.
Okay. You might have done this one, but that's okay. Wait, this is so bad. Would you rather get a paper cut on your tongue or have a booger in your nose that you can't quite reach all day?
I can't do paper cuts, so I have to.
So you're going to pick the booger? Okay.
So what about you, Jason? Pick one and read it.
Okay, let's see. Which one do I want here? I'll pick one that's really tough. Okay, how's that sound? I'll pick number 2. And I know that I know the question. Would you rather always have to pick your nose while talking to someone or always spit on people when you speak to them? I guess I'd pick the spitting because it would bring up less questions. And there was that funny skit where they were like, plump, plump, they were spitting on each other. I can't remember what that was on. It was probably like Saturday Night Live or something like that.
Yeah, plus you can pass it off as being something that just happens.
Yeah, it just happens, man.
Instead of like when you get like a finger up your nose or something, that's...
Okay, so where can people find you, Carl?
You can find me on Twitter at Carl Schweitzer.
And you can find me at twitter.com/ytechie. So it was good talking to you, Carl.
Likewise.